Thank you, Kevin. It's actually O'Carroll, but so he was close enough. I'm going to kick off here with the first folk song I ever learned from my mother, who was from Belfast. And as a child, she was taken with her family to the Belfast docks, where they watched the biggest boat in the world being built. And they were so proud of the fact that their little backwater of a city, a little sectarian backwater of a city, had been chosen to build what was to be the biggest ship in the world. I visited the Titanic Museum. If you get a chance when you're over there, pop up to Belfast and visit the museum. It's state of the art, it's very well done. And they don't shirk the facts. They tell you who got the good jobs and who got the tougher jobs, the sectarian divide. But when they also showed us how the cabins were for the wealthy folk, and the more interesting ones were the poor cabins. They had 2 bunk beds and a small wash basin. I don't know how many people they stuffed into the bunk beds. And then there was a chap in the cafe wearing a t-shirt that read, "It was all right when it left here." I tell my ma when I go home, the boys won't leave the girls alone. They pull my hair, stole my comb, that's all right till I go home. She is handsome, she is pretty, she's the belle of Belfast City. She's a quarter, 1, 2, 3, please come and tell me who is she. And when he says he loves her, all the boys are fighting for her. Knocking the door, ringing the bell, only to the fairly well. Out she comes white as snow, rings on her fingers, bells on her toes. Out to Murray, then she dies, then gets the fellow with the Roman eye. But the wind and the rain, hail, come high, snow, come travelling from the skies. She's as sweet as apple pie, she'll get her own head by and by. When she gets out of her own, she won't tell her ma when she gets home. Let them all come as they will, sound her moody, she loves still. I tell me when I go home, boys won't leave the girls alone. They pull my hair, stole my comb, that's all right till I go home. She is handsome, she's pretty, she's the belle of Belfast City. She's a quarter, 1, 2, 3, please come and tell me who is she. Thank you. Thank you. St. Patrick's Day when I was a kid in the 50s and 60s was a miserable affair in Ireland. I was, even as a child, I was unimpressed. There were several industrial floats, and the people attending them were so embarrassed by the whole thing. It was a time in the society when you didn't stick your head up. You were not to be noticed. The worst thing you could do is you make a holy show of yourself. So the army marched, the navy marched, our 3 jets from the Air Force flew over Dublin, Cork, Limerick and Galway, were home for their lunch. It was all a very, very quick affair. And in the 80s, the 70s and 80s, American marching bands came over with their batons and their short skirts and their boots and their jazzy instruments, bringing them around. The Irish said, "We can do that." And they do, yeah. Now, one of my favorite ballad makers lived in Dublin in the late 1700s into the 1800s. His name was Michael Moran, or Moran, as you say here, and he got measles as a child, which led to blindness, with no vaccinations back then. And he turned his considerable talents to ballad making. And he would sell his broadsheets on the streets of Dublin. And he would do a lot of Old Testament songs, but he'd make them more interesting by adding some geography from the Dublin area. For instance, he has a song on the finding of Moses. And it goes, "In Egypt's land, contagious to the Nile, the Pharaoh's daughter went to bathe in style. She took her dip and she came unto the land, and to dry her out royal pelt she ran along the strand. But then a bulrush tripped her, whereupon she saw a little babby in a wad of straw. She took it to the Pharaoh, said he in accents mild and grand, 'Thunder in Jesus Christ Almighty, girl, where did you get the child?'" And see your biblical chronology is kicking in now, huh? "Oh yeah, old woman, I'll search every nook from the Phoenix Park down to Donnybrook. And if I catch the little basket's father, I chase him from the Nile back into the River Dodder." And that's how he dealt with the finding of Moses. He has an interesting take on St. Patrick. He has St. Patrick chasing women, drinking, smoking and gambling. It's called Saints Just Want to Have Fun. St. Patrick was kidnapped and brought to Ireland as a slave, where he worked for 6 years, and then we're told he made his escape. We're not quite sure where he came from. Might have been Roman Britain. We do know his father's name was Calpurnius. And in Dublin in the 60s, a group was formed called the Irish Humanist Society. These are very brave people sticking their heads up in holy Catholic Ireland to say, we're atheists. And so their very first meeting was on the phenomenon of St. Patrick, and they had a lecturer over from Oxford or Cambridge to relate that Christianity in the early days was probably served by several people, and history conflated them into one person. And so that's how Patrick, so there's probably several more evangelists around at the time. So a wag writes into the evening paper a day later saying, here we have a crowd of atheists, don't believe in God, but think there were 6 St. Patricks. Anyway, here's a song about St. Patrick written by Zosimus, as Michael Moran called himself. He used the nom de plume, Zosimus. Most of the songs about St. Patrick are hymns, while I just deal in folk songs. So this is from Zosimus. St. Patrick was a gentleman, he came of decent people. He went to church in Dublin town, upon the put to sleep. His father was a Gallagher, his mother was a Grady. His aunt was Anne O'Shaughnessy, his uncle was a Brady. Wicklow Hill's very high, and so's the hill of Mozart. There's a hill much higher, still much higher, northern Mozart. On the top of that high hill, St. Patrick preached a sermon, drove the frogs into the bogs and banished all the vermin. Parents and the dirty farming mister were hearing majesty for front, he murdered them and clustered. The dogs up on the frogs, so stop up, pissed into the water. Snakes committed suicide to save themselves from slaughter. 900,000 vipers blew, charmed and sweet discourses, driving them that killed the loo in soups and second courses. Diamonds crawling in the grass, disgusted all the nation. Down to hell with the holy spell to change their situation. Irish towns, they are so free and frisky. Sure, St. Patrick taught us that as well as making whiskey. 'Tis a wonder the saint himself could understand this stillin'. His mother kept a sheep, he chopped the town of Enniskillen. Her aim up 'tis fortunate, 'tis to be back in Ulster. There I met her, remember down, and never more in Munster. There St. Patrick planted turf, cabbages and praties, pigs galore and Greenwich store on for cats and ladies. Here's to ball St. Paddy's fist. Was a saint so clever, for he gave the snakes and toads a twist, and he banished them forever. Thank you. I'm always astounded by some of the aspects of folklore. There's some very useful advice there. Crushing dandelions will make a kind of an elixir that will make you vomit or poop or something like that, and to get rid of what ails you. But then there's the really strange ones. An itch on this elbow here means somebody was arriving unexpectedly. An itch on this one here, somebody's leaving unexpectedly. Or maybe it's the other way around, I'm not sure. If you go in the front door of a house, you have to exit by the front door. If you go out the back door, you take all the bad luck of the house with you. If a bird flies into your house, it's bad luck. If it's a robin, really bad luck. Here's one that I find absolutely, it's either brilliant or daft. How to cure a whooping cough. Eat a loaf of bread baked by a woman who married a man with the same surname. If you believe, it can have an effect if you're invested in this, maybe. So maybe they might have discovered the placebo effect there. Who knows? I'd like to sing a song we all know. A song from my hometown. Molly Malone. I was once teaching this to children, and I read through this song first, and they came to the bit about the ghost, and the children started talking about ghosts. They were children about 7 years of age, plus or minus a year, and the conversations were, oh, my father says it's nonsense, my brother thinks there's one in the closet, my sister's terrified of them, etc., etc. One little savant, a little 7-year-old said, hush, I'll tell you what ghosts are. So we all hushed, and this little 7-year-old said, ghosts, she said, are dead people with issues. So I knew some of her neighbours, and I followed her career. In her teenage years, she became a goth. Black fingernails, dark aspect on everything. And now, she's finishing up her PhD in education. So I knew there was something special about that child. I also promised to send them a photograph of the statue of Molly Malone, which was prominent in Dublin at the time. Upon further inspection of the statue, she was a très décolleté, popping out of her dress. So I sent them cows and sheep or something like that instead. Here we go with the song, you know the chorus? In Dublin's fair city, where the girls are so pretty, I first set my eyes on sweet Molly Malone. As she wheeled her wheelbarrow through streets broad and narrow, like cockles and mussels, alive, alive, oh, your turn. Alive, alive, oh, oh, cockles and mussels, alive, alive, oh. She was a fishmonger and sure 'twas no wonder, so were her father and mother before. And they both wheeled their barrows through streets broad and narrow, like cockles, mussels, alive, alive, oh. Alive, alive, oh, alive, alive, oh. Cockles and mussels, alive, alive, oh. Sad verse. Now she died of a fever and no one could save her, and that was the end of poor Molly Malone. Now her ghost wheels her barrow through streets broad and narrow, like cockles and mussels, alive, alive, oh. Alive, alive, oh, alive, alive, oh. Cockles and mussels, alive, alive, oh. That's nice. I have another instrument here I'll play for you. Oh, dear me. This needs a drink. It's a goat skin, so it gets kind of taut. Anyway, cabbage is associated with St. Patrick's Day, corned beef and cabbage. Cabbage came to Ireland, I just learned this recently, through Oliver Cromwell. Not a popular guy in Ireland, I can tell you now. He came there in 1649, testing the loyalties of the different towns and that. And his men were suffering from it was called ague, A-G-U-E, kind of a malarial disease, and that made them ill-tempered. So things went from bad to worse. However, his soldiers brought with them cabbage, and they planted this in their barracks in Dublin. And it's a little area still known to this day as the Cabbage Patch, and that's where the Irish got cabbage. Here's a song about it. Has anybody ever had the dish called cannon? A few survivors, I say, yeah. Well, it's a simple dish. It's mashed potatoes with cabbage or kale, and chives and scallions and cigarette butts, or whatever's handy around the house. Usual stuff. It's nearly there. I should talk now and just get it right, but here we go. By the way, this instrument is called a bowron. There's a D in there, but the H silences that. The H is not a letter in the Irish language, it's a moderator. And it translates to the word deafener. Did you ever have colcannon made with lots of pickled greens? Well, the greens is candies winkle like a picture in a dream. Did you make a little hole on top of the hole, a creamy flake of the sweet and melted butter that your mother used to make? Oh, you did, so did she, and so did I. And the more I think about it, well, the nearer I'm to cry. Weren't them the happy days, troubles we knew not? Our mother made colcannon in the little skillet pot. Did you ever take potato cake or boxty to the school? Tucked underneath your oxter with your books and slate and roll. And when teacher wasn't looking, sure a great big bite you take of the creamy flavoured, soft and melted sweet potato cake. Oh, you did, so did she, and so did I. And the more I think about it, oh, the nearer I'm to cry. Weren't them the happy days? troubles we knew not. Our mother made calm cannon in the little skillet pot. Did you ever go a-courting, lads, when the evening sun went down, or the moon began a peeping from behind the hill of down? Did you wander down the boring where the Cluracon was seen, as you fit spread loving for races to your own dear sweet Colleen? Oh, you did, so you did, so did she, and so did I. The more I think about it, oh, the nearer I'm to cry. Weren't them the happy days, troubles we knew not? Our mother made call cannon in the little skillet pot. Thank you. It was not uncommon for Irish students to go work in construction in England. And so here's a story of a young man who went over there, a graduate student, who went into a construction site, and he says, have you got any work for me? The foreman said, I don't know, do you know anything about construction? The guy says, well, ask me any question you like. He said, well, what's the difference, he says, between a joist and a girder? Well, that's easy, joist wrote Finnegan's Wake and girder wrote Faust. However, he was given a job to bring bricks from here to there, and he came in 5 minutes later saying, there's something wrong with the wheelbarrow. It keeps going click, click, click. He says, you're fired. It should be going click, 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 click. Anyway, here's a song about a young man with a terrible accident on a construction site. So if there's anybody needs a good excuse not to go into work tomorrow, some of you might be retired even, who knows? Oh dear boss, I write this letter to you to tell you of my plight. And at the time of writing, I am not a pretty sight. My body is all black and blue, my face a deadly grey. And I hope you'll understand why Paddy's not at work today. I was working on the 14th floor, some bricks I had to clear. And throwing them down from such a height was not a good idea. The foreman wasn't very pleased, him being an awkward sod. He said I'd have to carry them down the ladder in my hod. Now shifting all the bricks by hand seemed so awful slow. So I hoisted up the barrel and secured the rope below. But in my haste to do the job, I was too blind to see that a barrel full of building bricks was heavier than me. Now when I came down, I cut the rope, the barrel fell like lead. But clinging tightly to the rope, I started up instead. I shot up like a rocket, but to my dismay I found halfway up I met the bloody barrel coming down. Now the barrel broke my shoulder bone as to the ground it sped. And when I reached the top, I struck the pulley with my head. Now I clung on, though numb with shock from this almighty blow, while the barrel spilled out half the bricks 14 floors below. Now when those bricks had fallen from the barrel to the floor, I then outweighed the barrel and I started down once more. Still clinging tightly to the rope, I headed for the ground and landed on the building bricks scattered all around. As I lay there moaning on the floor, I thought I'd passed the worst. But the barrel struck the pulley wheel and didn't the bottom burst. A shower of bricks came down on me, sure I haven't got a hope. And as I was losing consciousness, I let go the flippin' rope. Now the barrel, being heavier, started down once more, and it landed right across me as I lay there on the floor. I broke 3 ribs and my left arm, and I can only say that I hope you'll understand why Paddy's not at work. There's a remarkable building about 50 miles northwest of Dublin called Newgrange, and it's older than the pyramids. It's built about 5,200 years ago. It's got an opening above the entrance like this that admits the winter solstice around the 21st of December. It being Ireland, the sun may or may not make its appearance, but in the event it does, it turns this long corridor, about the length of this room, golden, bronze golden. It's quite a remarkable thing. They had their best and brightest working on this back in the day. The people who lived then fared a lot better than people did many centuries later in the 19th the 1800s. However, a lot of farms have what were called fairy forts on their properties, and there was always a reluctance to move these to make more arable land, because it was a belief that if you messed with these stone circles, the fairies would mess back with you, make you sick or make your cattle disease or your crops fail. So they were left alone. I visited one in Bunane on the road from Glengariff to Killarney, quite a magnificent stone circle there, and we're told from a post that you can see the sun climbing a mountain every 17 years. You might have to wait 34 or 51 for or the moon, climbing this hill for if the cloudless sky, you can see it all. However, the belief, it persists to this day. I mean, people don't mess with them. The wealthiest man in Ireland, who's now, he was bankrupted, he bought a bank that went under. His name was Sean Quinn. He moved an old grave, a portal, not a portal down, but a kind of a barrow grave. And the local people said he'll have no luck for that. They are chortling with Dick Lee now, because he's failed hugely. I'll play a tune of the tin whistle here to illustrate the beauty of this belief. It's a tune called Rí na Sióg, which translates to the King of the Fairies. Here it is. It's a kind of a fancy version of a tin whistle. Thank you. Vikings came to Ireland, we're told, in the year 847. 50 longboats appeared into Dublin Bay. There were two little communities there at the time. Dove Lynn, Dublin, Blackpool is the translation of that, and another little community called Baile Clia, the town of the Hurdle Fort. They put wind bushes over the sloblands of the River Liffey, which was uncontained at the time, to make it traversable between the two communities. The Vikings could float their boats on 4 feet of water, so they came up the River Liffey and sacked the towns, the two little communities, and took, from a Nordic saga, a great prey of women as slaves. 2 years later, they returned and settled Dublin, Waterford, Wexford, any place ending in Ford was a Viking settlement. And then they would use the rivers to raid the monasteries inland. They were there until from about 850 to 1014 was a major battle, showdown between the Irish High King, Brian Boru. His descendant is still living today in Limerick, in Thomond House, beside that big castle outside of Limerick there, Adair Castle. His genealogy goes reliably back to 200 BC. 34 feet long his genealogy is. But he puts his pants on one leg at a time, and the rest of us. I haven't got a song about the Vikings, except there was a verse of one. But the Danes came to Ireland with nothing to do but to plunder and pillage the Irish they slew. Killing your Vikings, says Brian Perrot, and he threw them back into the ocean. The sea, oh the sea, is grog down McCree. Allow me it to roll between England and me. It's a sure guarantee that somehow we'll be free. Thank God we're surrounded by water. But the Vikings had about 6,000 on their side, or 7,000 rather, and the Irish had 6,000. And at this point, there were Vikings on both sides. They had been there, after all, for 170, 160 years, and intermarriage had taken place, and it was very much like the Northern Alliance in Afghanistan, with people changing allegiances every other week, depending on who was the treasured warlord of the day. And at the end of the day, there were 600 Vikings left. They got caught in a flood of water and got slayed. Every now and then, a cache of their bones would be found with the heads bashed in. That was a coup de grace for the Irish. So after that, the King Sitric of Dublin, Brian Perrot, we're told, was in his tent. So typical of medieval stories, he was praying, thanking God for his victories, when a fella called Brodar the Mad from the Isle of Man came in and slew him. At this point, poor old Brian Perrot was 72 years of age, so he wasn't much of a fighting man. History for you, huh? And then the English come over. They haven't arrived yet. In 1169, the 1st of May, 400 men came over. There was an Irish king called Diarmaid MacMurrough who got ousted by his buddies, the other high kings. There was 5 kings of Ireland at the time in different territories. And he got in a beef with his fellow kings, and they just dethroned him. So he went to Wales and gathered a mercenary army. And then after the 400 arrived with archers and Norman families, then 4,000 came over a year later with King John. And things went from bad to worse. Here's a rebel song for you. This one's from a later date. This is from 1798. We had a rebellion inspired by the American Revolution. It's a song you probably know. It's The Rising of the Moon. It's written by a 16-year-old James Keegan Casey. The rebellion didn't work out too well. We had Lord Cornwallis come over to mop it up, just like he did here. And there was a gallows on wheels, and if you were lucky, you were sent to Australia. If you were not, the gallows welcomed you. Oh, then tell me, Sean O'Farrell, tell me why you hurry so. Hush your buckle, hush and listen, his cheeks were all aglow. I bear orders from the captain, get you ready quick and soon. The pikes must be together by the rising of the moon. By the rising of the moon, by the rising of the moon. The pikes must be together by the rising of the moon. Oh, then tell me, Sean O'Farrell, where the gathering is to be. At the old spot by the river, right well known to you and me. One more word for Stephen Token, whistle out to march a tune. And your pike upon your shoulder by the rising of the moon. By the rising of the moon, by the rising of the moon. Your pike upon your shoulder by the rising of the moon. And he's in one wall cabin, eyes are watching through the night. Many a manly heart is beating for the blessed morning light. Murmurs rang along the valley with the banshees lonely croon. 1,000 blades were flashing by the rising of the moon. By the rising of the moon, by the rising of the moon. 1,000 blades were flashing by the rising of the moon. There beside that singing river, that dark mass of men recede. For above their shining weapons on their own beloved green, death to every foe and traitor, whistle out to march and tune. Her army boys for freedom, 'tis the rising of the moon. 'Tis the rising of the moon, 'tis the rising of the moon. Her army boys for freedom, 'tis the rising of the moon. Well, they fought for dear old Ireland, and full bitter was their fate. Never will forget those gallant men of '98. They're still the men of action, hearts in manly bloom, who would follow in their footsteps at the rising of the moon, at the rising of the moon, at the rising of the moon, follow in their footsteps at the rising of the moon. I sing a song this time in the Irish language, just to give you a taste of the sounds of it. By the end of the 1700s, the Irish language had fallen out of favour because it wasn't of commercial value. Right now, about maybe 3 or 4% of the population are fluent, learning it from birth. There's 6 little Gaeltacht communities in the country. They're held together with the tax breaks and all kinds of community enhancements to try to keep the language in its native form. And these towns, they speak the language in the supermarkets, the post office and pubs and so forth. And in the meantime, there's been 200 schools have opened up in the last 25 years to teach all the subjects through the medium of the Irish language. And those schools have a slightly better record going on to third level education than the other secondary schools. So there's a kind of a quiet revival, but I don't know if it's enough to make it a common day language. Here's a song for you. It has a young man in his boat, his name is Phelim, and he's in his boat off the coast of Donegal, and he's fishing between the islands of Gowla and Tory. Tory Island is where the name Tory came from. It meant rebel back in the old days. And so his boat is described as being sleek and sturdy and strong and beautiful. And then he becomes a victim of his success. He catches so many fish his boat capsizes. So there's just 2 verses in it and 2 choruses, just to give you the sounds of the old Irish language. Bodin aile me dimi gutori, Bodin aile means fellow me out. Bodin aile me dimi gutori, Ishker bor agus fellow me out. Bodin dirak, Bodin jontak, Bodin derak, Bodin aile me, Bodin bidak, Bodin piontak, Bodin aile means fellow me out. Bodin aile me dimi go Gowla, Ishker bor agus fellow me out. Bodin aile me brisig os Tory, Ishker bor agus fellow me out. Bodin dirak, Bodin jontak, Bodin darak, Bodin aile me, Bodin bidak, Bodin piontak, Bodin aile me fellow me out. Thank you. Those of you with Irish names, there's usually a translation. Doyle, Dálaigh means dark stranger. That's a Viking name. The name Cotter is Viking also. Some of you may have done your ancestry. If you have some people from Brittany in France, they're probably Viking, because that's the King of France said, we'll give you Brittany if you leave us alone, and he did, and they did. So it's a complex bit of business. I have a brother who lives in north of Dublin in a town called Skerries. Skerries is a Viking word for rocky place. There's 2 little islands off there, St. Patrick's Island and Goat Island. And the local legend is that the people from Skerries stole St. Patrick's goat and ate it. And he was not happy about this, and he cursed them. They could only bleat to one another. And then they were unhappy with that, and they got another goat and restored Patrick to his goatdom. So in In 1916 there was a rebellion, and it wasn't very well arranged. It was during the First World War, and Churchill had come over to Ireland and told the Irish that if you joined the Allied forces, that you would get home rule. Now the version of home rule that they were offering wasn't particularly pleasing. It wasn't as much as they wanted. So some people got very, very kind of frustrated by this. There were poets, intellectuals, and one was a Labour leader. They decided to have a rebellion. And so on the 21st of April in 1916, Easter Monday, Pádraig Pearse walked out of the General Post Office and read a proclamation to the bemused passers-by in Dublin. Then he sent out his men with posters to put up around the city, but they hadn't any paste. So it was a big mess. I mean, they didn't cut the phone lines to Britain. They didn't do anything with the rail service or anything like that. So the British Army came, and it was pretty violent. At the end of the week, there were 500 dead. About 200 were British soldiers, 170 were the rebels, and the rest were civilians, including, very sadly, 40 children under the age of 16. There was one instance of a sweet shop that these little children who had no shoes on their feet had probably looked and gazed in that window for a long time and salivated at the candies that they could never afford. The British brought a gunship into the harbour and started shelling positions in the city. Accuracy was, 100 years old. And this one shell came and burst open the window of the sweet shop and scattered this candy all over the street. And so these kids all filling their jumpers up with it, and another bomb, another shell came in and ended their lives. It was a very sad affair. However, when the soldiers, the insurgents were being led away to prison, the citizens of Dublin, was not a popular uprising at all. And the people were jeering and throwing stones at them and cursing them for the wreckage they brought to the city and all the destruction and the deaths. Because a lot of these parents had sons who were either working in Britain or fighting in the First World War, and they were very unhappy about this rebellion. However, when they had executed, within 2 weeks of the rebellion, in the middle of May, they had executed 16 of the rebels, with 90 more scheduled to be executed. The Prime Minister from England, Asquith, came over and said, "You're losing public opinion here." Well, by that point, they'd lost it. And the population of Ireland realised that these men had, they'd created a kind of a sacrifice, and it was at Easter, and the symbolism was not lost on the people, and so on. Anyway, here's a song called The Foggy Dew. It commemorates this extraordinary event in our history. You have the 4th of July as your Independence Day. Ours, unfortunately, moves about because Easter moves about all the time. So. As down the glen one Easter morn to the city fair goes by, where armed lines of marching men in squadrons passing by. No pipe did hum nor battle drum, its sound, its loud tattoo, but the Angelus bell o'er the Liffey swell rang out in the foggy dew. Once England bade our wild geese believe that small nations might be free, and their lonely graves are by Sula's waves, by the fringe of the great North Sea. Oh, had they died by Pearse's side, or fought with Calveroo, their names we would keep where the fiends sleep, in the shroud of the foggy dew. The bravest fell, and the requiem bell rang mournfully and clear, for those who died at Easter tide, or the springtime of that year. And the world did gaze with deep amaze at those fearless men but few, who bore the fight that freedom's light might shine through the foggy dew. As back through the glen I rode torn. We parted there with great golden men, I know I never shall see you more. And to and fro in my dreams I go, I kneel and I pray for you. For slavery's fled when our rebel dead went into the funny view. Thank you. I'd tell you about an interesting group of people in Ireland. They used to be known as tinkers, but the name has become a pejorative over the years. They identify themselves as travellers. There's a population of about little under 50,000 of them. Traditionally, they used to travel around in horse-drawn wagons with the kind of the roof like this and the stovepipe out through the top of the roof. In the 1960s, the government decided that they should all be settled. And so they had a very, very tough program hunting these people from town to town to try to get them to settle. And of course, people didn't want them to settle beside them. And so after 2 years of this hounding these unfortunate people, they decided to provide them with halting sites so that they could use their wagons and stop there and do their cleaning and so forth. Right now, pretty much most of the travellers are settled. There's still a few hardcore on the side of the roads you might see as you travel around the country. Now, as tourists, you can rent some of those barrel-topped wagons and travel along minor roads and eat in gourmet restaurants and the like. And the horse gets to eat gourmet oats, I'm sure. But most of them now travel around in vans, and they have a kind of a shadow economy of their own. They've lived for so long outside of the laws and the civics of Ireland that it's very hard to bring them into the fold. Very recently, analysis was done of their DNA, and it was revealed that about 1,000 years ago, they kind of split off from the main population, which earns them an ethnic status within Ireland. It doesn't come with any particular money or any goodies or anything like that, just a recognition that they're an ethnic group within the larger community. And sad to say, they're greatly discriminated against. I even remember reading where a judge described them as they're like Neanderthals skulking in the long grasses. And when somebody of authority says something so nasty to a vulnerable group, there's always consequences from weak-minded people acting out these nutty observations from judges and the like. So I got to know some of the travellers, and I found their fascinating culture. They're very big into cleanliness. Inside their wagons are spotless. You could eat off the floor. They also have 6 or 7 basins for specific uses. There's one for washing vegetables in, one for preparing meat in, one for washing women's clothing in, one for men's clothing, one for the baby's nappies, for the diapers that they wore, and all of these kind of things. And if you were to use one of those for the wrong purpose, it would be considered taboo and thrown out. Very similar to the Roma people. There's some of their cleanliness traditions to keep themselves healthy. I got to know one of them very, very well. He's got an unusual name, and you're going to snicker at it, but I should explain. He worked for a Major Peckenham, and he used to ride horses for him, so he got the nickname the Pecker Don. And in Ireland parlance, your pecker is your nose. Because peck, that. So I travelled around Ireland with him when I was a student in the late 60s, and I got to inside some of the caravans, which is very rare for settled folk to be introduced into the travelling community. I got to know some of them. Some of them were in kind of a fairground show business. One of them would bend 6-inch nails in his teeth. Another fellow would lie in a bed of glass and have people stand on his chest. Another fellow would swallow a chain. Another chap had a big bullwhip and he'd knock cigarettes out of somebody's mouth with it. All of this great stuff. Got to, as a teenager, it was a fascinating bit of life for me. Now, the Pecker Dunn wrote a song called Sullivan's John, which has entered into the folk idiom. It's about a settled man who runs away with a band of tinkers. Oh, Sullivan. Sullivan's John, to the road you gone, far away from your native home. You're gone with the tinker's daughter, far along the road to Rome. Sullivan's John, no, you won't stick it along till your belly will soon grow slack. As you roam the road with the mighty load and toolbox on your back. I'm at Katie Cafe with her neat baby behind on her back strap on. She'd an old ash plant held in her hand for to drive her donkey on. Inquiring at every farmer's house as along the road she passed. Oh, it's where will I find an old pot to mend, or it's where can I sell an ass? Now I heard of a fair in the County Clare, in a place they call Spansel Hill, where my brother James got a rap of the Haines and poor Paddy they tried to kill. They loaded him up in an old ass and cart, while Kate and the baby looked on. Oh, that looked to the day that I went away for to join with the tinker band. Sullivan's John, to the road you gone, far away from your native home. You're gone with the tinker's daughter, far along the road to Rome. Sullivan's John, no, you won't stick it along, till your belly will soon grow slack. As you roam in the road with a mighty load and a toolbox on your back. Thank you. When I was a young fella, we didn't have many famous Irish people. We had Richard Harris and Peter O'Toole, and they lived lives very large. If they got in trouble in England, two Irish actors in a brawl in the West End. A couple of months later, British actor wins a prize at Cannes, the same people. He couldn't win for losing. And very recently, Cillian Murphy, who got the Oscar for the movie, was described as a British actor by one of the TVs over there. God, there was ructions to pay. But we're bigger than that now. I can remember in the 1950s when Brendan Behan, a wonderful playwright from Dublin, came to America. He came here and he was 9 months, he was sober. He didn't take any drink. And the press loved him. He was so quick-witted and charming. And then he took to the drink, and they loved him even more because it was fulfilling the stereotype. He went on a Jack Parr show drunk one time, and of course, I can remember my parents saying he's letting the whole country down. That's the way we felt about things in those days. He was a remarkable man. He went to England as a teenager and had a bag. He was arrested there with a bag of gelignite. He was a member of the Irish Republican Army. Many years later, he decided to leave the Irish Republican Army. They said that they were going to shoot him. And he said, "You can shoot me in absentia." He described his health problems. He said, "I'm a diabolic. If I don't get insulation, I'll fall prostitute on the floor in a coma." So between his drinking and his being a diabetic, he died in his early 40s. But he left us with some extraordinary work, a book called Borstal Boy, about his experience in British juvenile detention. And then several plays that he wrote, The Hostage and The Queer Fella. The song I do for you now is from a play called The Queer Fella. The Queer Fella in Dublin parlance simply means the person in question. It would be a fella being a male. If it was a woman, it would be the queer one. So here's the song. It's about somebody in their prison cell. They're hearing the triangle summoning people to different tasks. It's kind of like the blues idiom where the train whistle reminds them that they're incarcerated. A hungry feeling came o'er me stealing, and the mice, they were squealing round my prison cell, and the old triangle went jingle jangle all along the banks of the Royal Canal. To begin the morning, the screw was bawling, I get up you bowsy, and clean out your cell. And the old triangle went jingle jangle all along the banks of the Royal Canal. But in the female prison there are 70 women, and it's there among them I would like to dwell. And that old triangle could go jingle jangle all along the banks of the Royal Canal. But the day was dying, and the lag lay sighing, and the seagulls were flying round my prison cell. And the old triangle went jingle jangle all along the banks of the Royal Canal. All along the banks of the Royal Canal. Ireland could lay claim to the whole Gothic revival thing. We had 3 books from Dublin writers. One of them was by a fellow called George Maturin, who wrote about a fellow made a deal with the devil for the soul. Another fellow called Sheridan Le Fanu, who would have been of Huguenot origins, French Protestants kicked out of France in the 1600s. He wrote one called Carmilla, about a lesbian vampire. And then the daddy of them all, Dracula, was written by Bram Stoker from Marino in Dublin. He was a literary, he wrote about 20 books. None of them had much success. In New York, they put on a play of his, and Hollywood got a hold of it and did Nosferatu. And there was a copyright. Bram Stoker's wife, he was dead at this point, she sued and bankrupted that film company. And then Bela Lugosi was playing off Broadway, and things got so heated that they had to give a nurse at the theatre because people were fainting, or at least they told us that people were fainting, and that's why they had to have a nurse there. It was just the time of P.T. Barnum and all these kind of bunkum stuff going on, so there was a lot of trickery in advertising and the like. So I don't have a song about Dracula, sadly, you know. But I do have a lovely song about Dublin. This was sung by a neighbour of mine, a fellow called Noel Purcell, who acted in a movie with Gregory Peck that was filmed off the coast of Kinsale down in the County Cork in Ireland. The movie was Moby Dick. And we were just over the moon that this local man had been in with Gregory Peck, Hollywood and all that. It was extraordinary. And he was a kind man, big head of hair on him. He always had a packet of sweets that he'd... And if you only took one sweet, he'd wonder what was wrong with you. He was just such a charming, lovely man. Anyway, he sang a song called Dublin Saunter. It sounds like a soft shoe shuffle. If there's anybody who wants to hop up and do a bit of tapping, I'd love to see it. I've been east and I've been west and I've been north and south. I've been just a rolling stone. There's one place on this earth I truly love the best, just a little place I call my home. Oh, Dublin could be heaven with coffee at 11 and a stroll round Stephen's Green. There's the need to hurry, there's the need to worry, we keep the ladies in green. Grafton seems a wonderland, there's magic in the air, diamonds in the lady's eyes and goldness in her hair. And if you don't believe me, come and meet me there. Dublin on a sunny summer's morning. I've been here and I've been there, I saw the rainbow's end, but no crock of gold I found. But there's one place on this earth I truly love the best, where my feet are deep and friendly ground. Oh, Dublin could be heaven with coffee at 11 and a stroll round Stephen's Green. There's a need to hurry, there's a need to worry, the king, the ladies and queen. Grafton seems a wonderland, there's magic in the air, diamonds in the ladies' eyes and gold. meet me there in Dublin on a sunny summer's morning. Thank you. We have another few minutes just. So there were two women lived up in the Dublin mountains. We have mountains in Dublin too, where it leads on into Wicklow. There's the sugar loaf and the scalp and so these two women, Bridget and Mary, they lived and they walked 4 miles every Sunday together down the laneways and over the main street and into the church and 4 miles back. And they talked all the way there and all the way back and all the time during Mass as well. So one time after Mass, there was an American couple. This is back in the 1950s. A fine-looking man with a crew cut, and his pants didn't quite meet his shoes. It was the style at the time. And his wife had the largest handbag that parish had ever seen, a big white job hanging from her elbow. And the priest was chatting with them, and he summoned Bridget over to come and meet them. And Mary waited. And when Bridget rejoined Mary, she said, well, tell us about the Yanks. I often wondered how people from the South felt about being called Yanks. Everybody who from America was known, certainly in the 50s, as a Yank. So tell me about the Yanks. She said, Bridget said, they're distant cousins of mine, and they're coming to dinner on Tuesday. And Mary said, oh, for God's sake, the Brennans had somebody last year and they're not over it yet. What will you feed them? Did you see the size of them? She said, no, I've got a goose, and I'll neck it and pluck it and cook it and stuff and so forth. It'll be grand. Some spuds and a little bit of parsley and some carrots and cake, cup of tea. I can do this, it'll be fine. So the following Sunday, they meet. And Mary said, well, how did you get on with the visitors? And Bridget said, well, it's 5 o'clock, 6, 7, 8, 9 o'clock came, no sign of them, they never showed up at all. And what did you do with all the food? Well, what could I do but I ate it myself? Oh, says Mary, you committed the sin of adultery now. That's serious stuff. You'll have to clear your soul of that. So poor Bridget was in flithers. Didn't know what to do with herself. As soon as she got to the main street, she crossed it with such care in case she'd get hit by a car and end up in the high hob of hell. So she burst into the church straight to the confession box. The priest eventually slides the little door open across the grill and he says, hello, how are you? How long has it been? And what have you got to tell me? He was a great man in the box. And she said, Father, she said, she's so flushed, I committed adultery. The priest said, a lady in the twilight of her years, how did this come to pass? Oh, she said, Father, you have no understanding of my appetites. There he was, up in the middle of the table, his 2 legs up in the air and him nice and brown. I couldn't help myself. That's all. Is that fit for cable television?
I don't know.
We'll see. Anyway, you all have computers now, and I've been really listening to a lot of radio on my computer. You can, if you have an Apple product, you can download Radio Garden, listen to it. Every radio station in the world. So there's about 70 stations in Ireland, and it's delightful listening. There's none of this left-wing, right-wing partisan stuff. It's people calling in and complaining about local issues and the price of the pint and whatever was on their minds. And it's delightful stuff. Recently, a couple of great stories. One was a woman had lost her keys in a taxi cab, and it was either a silver or grey Prius. And she knows that they're still in the cab because she has a tracker on her key ring. And her keys were having a wonderful time. They were going up to the airport, and out to Kildare, and up to Belfast, and down to Wicklow, and all over the city. And while she was chatting with the guy on the radio program, the tracker went off. And he said, well, where is it? She said, well, it's on the Howth Road, which is north of Dublin. And then 5 minutes later, a man phoned and said, the taxi just passed my house. I'm going after it. And so he got in his car, and then the guy on the radio said, now hold on a minute, are you driving hands-free here? We can't have another accident. Yes, that's all right. And he says, cars that are approaching, every other car's flashing the lights of the taxi. Anyway, he caught up and the keys were restored. And it was marvellous radio. It was like Sherlock Holmes. And then another one, a very experienced broadcaster called Cathal McConnell was interviewing a lady from the Aran Islands off the west coast of Ireland, where they predominantly speak Irish, but so English would have been a second language with her. And he was chatting away. This may not be suitable for cable TV, but you're a lovely audience out there, I'll tell you. And so chatting away, he says, you reached the great age of 100 and you got your €1,500 from the government, which is the prize they give you when you reach that great age. And he said, I understand you've never been bedridden in your life. Oh, she says, I have several times, and once in a canoe. If you ask somebody who's 100 years old a question, they can say whatever they like. They have earned the right. Anyway, here's a song from Tommy Makem. It's a kind of an aspirational song called Four Green Fields. It's how we would like to see the country reunited again. We're going to have to wait a while, perhaps, but the population of Catholics in the north of Ireland has been increasing. But not every Catholic wants to be part of a united Ireland, but it could possibly happen within the next 40 or 50 years. I don't know, we'll see. You can't rush these things at all. So Tommy Makem wrote this song called The Four Green Fields. Ulster, Munster, Leinster and Connacht. And the one green field in bondage would be part of the province of Ulster. There are 9 counties there, 6 of them under the British administration. What did I have? Said the fine old woman. What did I have? This proud old woman did say, I have 4 green fields, each one was a jewel, till strangers came and tried to take them from me. I had 5 strong sons, they fought to save my jewels, they fought and they died. And that was my grief, said she. Long time ago, said the fine old woman. Long time ago, this proud old woman did say, there was war and death, plundering and pillage, my children starved by mountain, valley and sea, and their wailing cries, they touched the very heavens. My 4 green fields ran red with their blood, said she. What have I now? Said the fine old woman. What have I now? This proud old woman did say, I have 4 green fields, one of them's in bondage, in strangers' hands. They tried to keep it from me, but my sons have sons as brave as were their fathers. My 4 green fields will bloom once again, said she. Thank you. So Ireland is doing well at the moment. It's still a member of the EU, and if you were to divide the goods and services produced by Ireland divided by the population, they're doing twice as well as their neighbours in Britain are at the moment. There's about 10 American companies keeping Ireland afloat, including Google and several pharmaceutical companies and the like. And they're also, I'm one of 13% of people born in Ireland now living overseas. Currently there's almost 17% living in Ireland who were also born overseas, including 100,000 Ukrainian refugees and usual selection of migrants and asylum seekers and people seeking a better life and fleeing climate change and the like. So it's been a challenge for Ireland to accommodate this almost 17% over the last number of years, but it's doing it fairly well. We could learn a lot more. However, time for me to wrap it up. Here's a toast to your health, if you might like to use this over St. Patrick's season. May the roof above us never fall in and us beneath it never fall out. Sláinte. I'll finish with a song called The Parting Glass, which is one that the Clancy's always finished their shows with. And if you ever saw that movie, I think Ned Devine, it was featured in that. Anyway, it's about a fellow who's anticipating his own demise. Oh, if all the money that e'er I've had, I have spent it in good company. And if all the harm that e'er I've done, alas, it was to none but me. And all that I've done for want of wit, to memory now I can't recall. So fill to me the parting glass, good night, and joy be with you all. Oh, there is a fair maid in this town, I own she has my heart beguiled, and if I had money enough to spend, on leisure for to stay a while, her ruby lips and rosy cheeks, oh, I own she has my heart in thrall. So fill to me the parting glass, good night, and joy be with you all. Oh, if all the comrades that e'er I've had, they are sorry for my going away, and if all the sweethearts that e'er I've known would wish me one more day to stay, but since it falls unto my lot that I should rise and you should not, I will gently rise and I'll softly call good night, and joy be with you all. And happy St. Patrick's Day. Thank you.